We are less than a week away from the dead period, June 27th for college football. So teams across the nation are scurrying toward those last commits to get them in and, of course, make their final impressions, at least for this section of recruiting for 2023. Welcome into Iowa Hawkeyes Live right here at the Voice of College Football, edition number 47. And the guy that, of course, makes this happen each and every week from the Hawkeye of the Storms, Corey Bratta. Corey, how you doing?
Doing great, Mark. It's always a good day talking Iowa football. I know we've got Alec here. We're going to be talking Illinois and kind of comparing these two programs and the deep connections with Brett Bielema. And, of course, this is one of the rivalries that nobody talks about. It should be a bigger rivalry. I think Brett has an opportunity to kind of revive that. But, no, I'm excited. Iowa got a commitment before we came on the air from a guy who his intangibles are a little bit odd. We can talk about that maybe later, but he's 6'9", and he's still, he's going into his senior year of high school. So I wonder what happens if he grows another inch or two. That's my question. But no, this is fun. I'm glad that you and Alec, we're all making this happen, and I look forward to discussing Iowa football.
Folks, you know the drill. Leave the comments and questions there in the live chat. We will get to them as we continue our opponents media series. We're bringing on a media member for the entire Iowa schedule. This week, we got Alec Buxey on the line. You can join him right there on Illinois Rivals platform, Orange and Blue News. Alec, how you doing today?
Good, guys. Thanks for having me on. It's been a wild, last 36 hours. I was just on vacation, got back from Hawaii. Crazy travel plans with everything happening on the plane. We can get into it if you guys want me to. I was talking with you guys before. It was one of the craziest things I think I've ever witnessed in my life. So
I think people want to hear it, don't you, Mark?
All right, we can get into it. So
sure.
My plane's supposed to leave 8:00, I think, Sunday night from Maui. Everything's fine. Get on the plane. I'm in an exit row, 4 or 5 rows behind me, about an hour and a half into the flight. There's some sort of commotion, and the pilot comes over the speakers and goes, "We got some sort of medical emergency." And I can see flight attendants are kind of going behind me and take out my AirPods. I'm watching a movie or a documentary or whatever. And I turn around and there's a man laying on the aisle of the airline, and I'm like, oh, that's not good. And then there's doctors, passengers on the plane who are doctors and nurses are running to this scene. One of them's a cardiologist. They end up having to get the defibrillators out after a little bit of time. He gets revived after, I think I heard, a few minutes of being out of it, completely, he wasn't with us anymore on the plane. We end up turning around. Thankfully, he's revived. He's all right. Paramedics come get him off the plane when we land back in Honolulu. But as we land, something goes wrong on the runway. Tire pops on the plane. Then they're like, all right, we're going to have to replace this tire, get you guys back on the plane. We're going to fly back over to at least LAX. We were supposed to go to Dallas originally. Then an hour and a half later, they're like, hey, everyone, we don't have the supplies to change the tire, so we can't fly you guys out tonight. And we're like, oh, phenomenal. So now we're stranded in Hawaii. And of course, there's much better places in the world to not be stranded. Everyone wants to be stranded in Hawaii, right? But we don't end up flying out until 6:00 p.m. Monday in Hawaii. Land in Dallas at 8:00 a.m., which is just weird. Time change Hawaii to continental United States is really weird to begin with. So did a red-eye flight, and then I was able to get on another flight close to St. Louis, which is where I'm from. Got home, did some prep for this, and now I'm ready to go. And I'm off vacation, and this is my first journalistic responsibility coming back from vacation.
So everybody, if Alec mispronounces a name or forgets the backup right guard or whatever the case might be, please cut him some slack here. Corey, I'm really not struggling for some kind of really bad transitions from that. Brett Bielema is trying to revive the Illinois program, or the Illinois offense, had a flat tire, last season, there's.
I think the first one, Brett Bielema was trying to revive the program because I'll make the transition. Alec, Mark and I have talked about this, and we both hesitate to use the term sleeping giant to describe what Illinois could be. But given the recruiting footprint, Illinois, it would be on my probably top 5 in all of the Power 5 for most underachieving programs in the country this century. We know the vaunted Illinois defenses of the 20th century, but as far as a recruiting landscape, Brett Bielema, Lovie Smith had it as well, and he wasn't really able to really get over the hump. But I do think that the West, as it relates to coaching, is in as good of a position as it's ever been. And I don't think that's really up for debate. Mark, can we agree on that? Across the board, whether you're talking PJ Fleck or Kirk or Ferentz or Brom, I think it's and then Pat, we're not even talking about Pat Fitzgerald, who probably is the best coach, right up there certainly with Kirk and I think PJ. So how confident are Illini fans right now, having a year into this experiment with Brett? Is it a year now? He's only been there a year, correct?
Yeah, full year.
My time frame messed up. I know there was some attrition with the transfer portal, which I think is somewhat normal, especially this early into a guy's tenure there. I remember looking back at the numbers early, and I looked at Iowa compared to the rest of the Big Ten, and Illinois had lost a ton of guys and had gotten like nobody, which was a concern. I was concerned about Iowa at the time because they hadn't really gotten anybody, but the difference is they hadn't really lost anybody either. And Illinois was in a weird position. But you explained to me before we went live that Brett kind of takes a different approach to the portal. So how do Illini fans kind of perceive Illinois right now? Because of course they've got a gauntlet playing in this division, and I don't know what they're out of. I need to pull up their out of division lineup as well. But how do fans perceive the program at this point?
I think that there's a cautious optimism. Like there's a positive energy about Illinois football that maybe didn't exist for a long time. I mean, I think you think back to like the 2019 4-game win streak to kind of end the season, not really end the season. They did lose the last couple games that year, but to go to a bowl game, I mean, that just kind of felt fugazi, I guess, a little bit. It felt like there was a lot of luck involved to beat the number 6 team in the country in Wisconsin, to have the largest comeback in school history, a 28-3 comeback on the road at Michigan State. Like those are kind of lucky wins, right? And like those happen all the time in college football, but to have that happen twice in a span of 4 weeks is pretty lucky. But Coach Bielema seems to do a really good job of just kind of communicating and being like a figurehead that Lovie Smith wasn't for Illinois fans, right? Like he's out in the community. He's active on social media. He's always talking about family. And, like this past week, they're posting videos on social media of the entire team playing paintball on the outdoor practice facility. Like he does things that make it feel like a college program, I think, for the players, and the players love him. They love his coaching staff. They just rave about the type of person he is. And that's not to say that they didn't do that stuff with Lovie Smith, but I think now it feels more like a college program to the players. And I think the fans kind of see that too, because they see that there's just more energy and it's more positive. And of course, like there's the things that come out last year during the season about what he said about the offensive line, which like was true and it was taken out of context, but like he is, in my opinion, doing a good job, at least in his first year and a half now on the job. And I understand they didn't go to a bowl game last year and they had 2 or 3 pretty frustrating losses, I think, in the minds of a lot of fans, and decisions to not go for it on 4th and short against Maryland and Purdue. And I think back-to-back weeks, potentially cost Illinois back-to-back wins. And that obviously really hurt them. But there was marked improvement based off what they did last year. That it was a team that routinely got blown out by teams across the Big Ten with Lovie Smith. And last year they only got blown out twice. They lost on the road early in the year to a Virginia team that has a pretty explosive offense. Brennan Armstrong, he's coming back again this year. And Virginia does come to Champaign. It's a home and home. And then they also got blown out by Wisconsin 24-0 in Champaign. And that was one of their uglier offensive performances. And I don't think they actually gained over 100 total yards in that game. And that game is one of the games I think that probably led to offensive coordinator Tony Peterson being fired after just 1 year. We can talk about that a little bit later too, if you guys want. But overall, it felt like a pretty positive first year under Brett Bielema. And I think there's some positive momentum going into the second season. And while like last year's recruiting class, the 2022 class, wasn't the most highly ranked or highly touted in the country, you look at what he did with classes at Wisconsin, and it's kind of one of those situations where it's going to be a developmental program. It's going to be a lot of players that are maybe 3 lower 4 stars. They're not going to recruit a lot of 5 stars. They're probably not going to land a lot of 5 stars, maybe even high 4 stars. That's just not something Illinois football is in a position to do. But he wants to find players, develop them with a staff that has a good track record of doing that, and kind of model it, guys, after what Iowa has been able to do under Kirk Ferentz. And that's obviously where Brett Bielema learns his college football, I guess, formulas. I mean, under Hayden Fry and then eventually Kirk Ferentz.
I am curious. Has Tommy DeVito been named the starter as of right now?
Yeah, he hasn't been named the starter officially, but I do expect him to be the starting quarterback.
Okay.
Art Sikowski is the other one who is going to be considered in that quarterback battle. I don't expect Ryan Johnson to be in that conversation, but Sikowski had to get 2 offseason surgeries, one on a broken wrist that he hurt at the end of that Penn State game, the one Illinois won.
Shoulder. The other one was a shoulder, right?
Yeah. Well, he had to get a broken wrist, and then he also had to get shoulder surgery. I believe it's for a torn labrum. Don't quote me on that. It was an injury.
I'll tell you. So I don't want to interrupt you, but I just interviewed Tony Rasiopi yesterday, who's his private instructor, and he told me it was actually the labrum and the rotator cuff. So that's
cool. Yeah, I didn't know it was rotator cuff. But yeah, he played through that all of last year. Didn't tell any of his teammates. The only coaches I knew, I'm pretty sure, were Bielema and the offensive. So he'll have an opportunity to battle for it, but I do expect Vito to win the job.
So obviously that's going to be an interesting battle, and I know Tony is a huge Art Sikowski fan, understandably so, given that he's his private instructor. That makes sense. I think Iowa fans, this is another one of those games that maybe I'm just a worrywart, but I look at the last 2 years, and Iowa very easily could have lost in 2020. At Illinois. I mean, that was a game that I think...
You're thinking 2019 in Iowa City. They got blown out in Champaign in 2020.
Well, they got blown out. Well, they ended up getting blown out, but as I recall, at halftime, Illinois was ahead, if I'm not mistaken.
They might have been. They started that game up, I think, 14-0, and then just completely stalled. Yeah.
They did. And that's kind of been Illinois' MO. But last year, same thing. I mean, last year had Charlie Jones not popped off the kick return for a touchdown, I think it was in the second quarter. Those games where Iowa struggled, and there were times where Iowa struggled defensively against Illinois. I do wonder with Illinois' rushing attack, it's been one of the more underrated rushing attacks, not only in the Big Ten, but in the country for quite some time. And I do wonder, given Brett's track record, I think of back at his time at Wisconsin and some of the wrinkles that he would show against Iowa. And I'm not saying that he's not going to show wrinkles against other teams, because he did when he was at Wisconsin. I'm sure he'll do it again. But I do wonder if we're going to see something surprising, given the matchup of Brett versus his old team. I think that's something that Iowa fans should expect. Just your thoughts on Brett and his imagination, maybe compared to a Lovie Smith.
Well, I think it's kind of interesting. He didn't get a chance to coach against Iowa last year. He had tested positive for COVID, so he didn't make the trip to Iowa City. And I think there's obviously an animosity between Illinois football fans and Iowa football fans, but I think it's more strongly on the Illinois basketball side with Iowa basketball fans. But there definitely is still like a disdain. And you said it pretty well earlier. An underrated rivalry, I feel like, is a good way to say it for each program. I think that Bielema, especially on the offensive side, is getting more creative this offseason with the hiring of Barry Lenny Jr., the new offensive coordinator. He comes Illinois from UTSA. They had a really explosive offense down there. The Roadrunners did. They were obviously one of the better Group of 5 programs. I think they were undefeated until the last.
Illinois found that out the hard way.
Yes, right? They did. Zachary Franklin tore them apart. Just to name a name, he was a receiver for them. And he hires Barry Lenny Jr., guy who has connections with dating back to their time at Arkansas. He was actually a tight ends coach that Bielema hired at Arkansas. And he runs a 10 pro offense. Essentially it's a pro style offense with tempo, but they're also going to do some things in the no huddle, which is definitely something that you didn't see last year Illinois do at all. They were even under center a lot last year under Tony Peterson. And that's something that I don't think you're going to see very much, maybe at all this year, outside of certain packages, maybe goal line packages, 4th and goals, whatever it may be. So you're kind of looking at, with Coach Bielema, maybe a modernization of what he wants to do offensively. And I think that's something that's needed. You kind of look at what a lot of the more successful offenses are doing, not just in the Big Ten, but also across the entire country. I think it's really hard, especially in Illinois' case. They're trying to model themselves off of Iowa and Wisconsin. It's hard to beat Iowa and Wisconsin at Iowa and Wisconsin's own game, right? Like they've been doing that for 20, 30 years at this point in each program's case. And I think what Bielema is trying to do now is find the players, develop them, speaking on the offensive side of the ball, but put them in a position to maybe modernize the offense a little bit, speed the game up a little bit, play with a little bit of maybe spread principles at times, but also still have the pro style principles that I've come to know with Brett Bielema in his time as a college head coach.
Mark, you're a big Brett Bielema fan. You have anything to add to this conversation? I know you're a big Brett Bielema fan because I recall a discussion you and I had, I want to say summer of 2021, just discussing him at Illinois. And I remember coming onto the show. For some reason, this stands out. I made a comment about how Brett really didn't get it done down at Arkansas, and you came to his defense. Just your take on Bielema.
Yeah, I did. Of course, a difficult situation playing in that division with what he took over, and he had it all moving in the right direction for a long time there before it turned ugly on him. And really, it was one bad season that got him fired. You know, he was only 1 year removed from 7-5, and Arkansas went in another direction, and that was not a good direction for the next 3 or 4 years, but now they're in a different place. What I found interesting about what Bielema had to say once he got the Illinois job, Alec, was that, he certainly had his core values from a football standpoint, core values in the running game and tough-mindedness and all those things we see from Brett Bielema and have through his Wisconsin and Arkansas experiences, but that he learned a lot going to the NFL and realized that football had changed and that you could still bring a lot of those foundational values, but you needed to adapt. Do you see that happening in the program and with the offense in particular?
Yeah, he talks a lot about how much he learned from Coach Belichick with the Patriots. He was only on that staff for a year or two, but he did win a Super Bowl there. He does have a Super Bowl ring, which is pretty cool, obviously. He did. He talks a lot about that and that learning experience and how he's brought a lot of that to college. And I think one area that you really see that, and this is a year and a half removed now, when he first came to Illinois and he was building the staff, not just the coaching staff, but the entire support staff, when you talk about the recruiting staff and just other positions on the staff, he hired a high school relations coach or a high school relations person. And that person is Pat Ryan. He's a legendary high school coach in the state of Illinois. And that essentially Ryan's main job is to just develop relationships with high school coaches across the state of Illinois. And Bielema's biggest thing since he came to Illinois is in-state recruiting. We want to own the state, put a fence around the state. And because that's what Lovie Smith didn't do. I mean, it's pretty famous in 2020. Illinois didn't sign a single player from the state of Illinois. And for Illinois to be successful in Coach Bielema's eyes, they need to be able to recruit the state really well and have a lot of the principles of Illinois high school football players within their program. So I think you've seen a lot of that in terms of the way Coach Ryan has kind of helped build that. But then you also see him have a recruiting position designed mostly for in-state, but then they also have someone who just scours the portal all the time. And then they have your traditional director of recruiting. And then they also have a director of pro relations. They have all of these different spots and all of these different roles. And I'm not trying to compare him to Nick Saban because that's definitely not an apt comparison to make for what they both accomplished on the field. But think back to what Nick Saban did when he got to Alabama and kind of the early part of the 2010s, right? He hires all these analysts, and all these analysts aren't getting paid a whole lot of money, but they allow the coaches on the staff to not have to handle as much of the dirty work that's maybe not as important. And these analysts are able to learn all these different things. And then they turn into guys like Billy Napier, right? And the guys that Bielema's hiring aren't going to do the same thing, but they're hired in roles that allow the assistant coaches and him to focus more on the things that they need to focus on, whether that's recruiting, whether that's game day preparation, whether that's actually coaching in a game or building relationships with the players. Those are all things that these different people on the staff are allowed to do. And in terms of what he's learned offensively, I think it kind of goes back a lot to what he learned last year at Illinois in his first year. I think he came in, he wanted to try and do a lot of the same things that he did at Wisconsin, what Iowa has kind of done for a long time with Tony Peterson, a guy he had a relationship with dating back to when Peterson was the co-offensive coordinator at Minnesota when they were one of the more potent rushing attacks in the Big Ten around the mid-2000s era. You kind of look at a thing here where Bielema realized that didn't work, and he completely changed it. And it's rare to see a head coach fire an offensive coordinator after just one season, and not only do that, but to do it when it's a full-scale rebuild of the program. And he's been open in saying that, and what his goal is to sustain success. Like, he needs to make Illinois that. That's what he needs to do in his eyes. That's athletic director Josh Whitman's goal. And he believes that, like, this new offensive coordinator and this new scheme is going to better set them up to be more successful consistently on offense and take a lot of the pressure off of the defense, which made huge strides last year and under the first year of Ryan Walters.
I will say this, the schedule for Illinois, I would say it's more difficult opening up than Iowa's is. You get that same Virginia team. I know Indiana was dreadful last year, but you have to go on the road. I expect that. I expect the Hoosiers to be better with Connor Bazelak, and Wyoming is dealing with weird issues as well. I don't know that I'm qualified enough to speak on their problems, but I do think they're going to be battle tested heading into the Iowa game. I think Iowa on the schedule for them coming off the Michigan game, who knows when that game's going to be played. We've seen Iowa. I don't want to call them hangovers. I think of the 2017 game against Ohio State, where Iowa just dominates at home and then they run into a buzzsaw. They don't score a single point offensively at Illinois the very next week. So I'm not saying that's going to happen here. But I will say this. You brought up something, Alec, about Brett Bielema and Illinois not trying to necessarily beat Iowa and Wisconsin at their own game. If anybody's going to do it, it might be Brett, though, because I mean, let's be honest. He did that a lot at Wisconsin against the Hawks. So, yeah, you may not be able to do it this year. I think you're right. I think that in my opinion, that's the right approach. You're going to have to develop these guys over the course of several years, especially if you're trying to develop kids out of high school. So you may have to win different ways your first year, 2, or even 3. So I think that's going to be fascinating to see the wrinkles, because I do expect to see some of those wrinkles in this game. I will say this, just add in, and if there's anything else from Mark, and we can let Alex slide. But Iowa did just get a commitment today from Kaden Leonard. I brought him up earlier, right up the road from Champaign, and I know Illinois was in on him, did not offer, but he just committed to Iowa. Just thoughts on that, Alec? And are you surprised at all that Illinois didn't offer? Iowa was the only Power 5 to offer.
Yeah, I think they actually got in with an offer over the weekend. I could be wrong.
They did. Okay.
Well, I could be wrong there. I know they showed interest. They actually signed his older brother, Clayton Leonard, who isn't as highly touted of a prospect. And we were talking maybe a little bit before the show, right as we started, that Clayton's little brother, Cannon, is about 6'9".
Yeah.
And that's obviously something that was really attractive to Illinois, especially at tackle. And he's a 2024 prospect, correct?
He's 23.
Okay, so he's a 2023 prospect. So I think one of the reasons why Illinois probably didn't show a whole lot of interest in this was largely because they've already kind of filled up on what they're looking for in the offensive line in the 2023 class. And that's just kind of one of those things where you only have so many bodies that you can take. And even though the NCAA kind of has given relief on this new thing with not just 85 and there's not the 25 limit, but they've already taken a few offensive linemen. They've taken TJ McMillan. He's a center, probably going to be a starter for Illinois for a few years. I'm pretty high on him. And then they've also taken a few others, and Zachary Amlin. He's someone from New Jersey. Took Rico Jackson. And there's another kid down from East St. Louis. That's an area where Illinois really wants to recruit harder down there. One of the more talented programs in the entire state. I don't know how well-versed you guys are in East St. Louis football, but it's a pretty talented program. They have a prospect that Illinois would probably end up taking another offensive lineman for because they want to build relationships with that program. But when you think about the idea of passing on Leonard, or maybe not pushing as hard for Leonard, it might have been a situation where they felt like they had other prospects higher on their board. And like you kind of said earlier, there's a rawness to that. Yeah, he's got the size, but he maybe doesn't have the weight that they're looking for on the offensive line. Illinois is really trying to get big on the offensive line. think Wisconsin when it comes to what Illinois wants to be on the offensive line.
Minnesota
too. That's a really good. Yeah, Minnesota's offensive line last year was one of the largest groups of people I've ever seen in my life. Yeah. And I think it's one of those things where you can only take so many people. And while offensive line is really important, and that's what Brett Bielema was kind of largely known for in his tenure, the decision to maybe not push there might have been also just because they felt Iowa was going to get him all along. I mean, there's one of those situations where sometimes other schools don't offer. I don't have a lot of direct insight on that specific recruitment, but I know that his older brother Clayton is someone that they kind of view as maybe a little bit more of a project, and they've already got other guys in this offensive line class. But it's hard to pass on 6'9" a tackle, right? Like that's always impressive.
And I'll just say this: I said it at the outset, and I'm sure once you get off Alec, we'll probably dive into this more. But what happens if he grows 2 inches more? I mean, I don't think that's likely, but I'm just saying he's like,
or 17? Even an inch.
Yeah, I mean, are we seriously going to play a 6'10" tackle, Mark? I mean, I'd be concerned about. I mean, seriously, I'd be concerned about that because that's out of your control. Unless they have reason to believe, even if he's not grown for the last year, and I don't know his history because I haven't dove into it as much as I probably should. I don't know. It's a weird one. And then obviously Iowa fans know that they're in the top 2 for Kaden Proctor. So you could potentially have Proctor's, I think, 6'7", 6'8", somewhere in there. You could potentially have, a couple guys who were 6'8", 6'9", coming in at tackle in 23. But anything else for Alec, Mark, before we let him slide?
Well, I've got one other thing. And speaking of Minnesota, Alex mentioned their, offensive line. I cannot recall the player's name that had played very little football that was recruited and signed by Minnesota and turned out to be an all Big Ten player at 6'9". For Minnesota, just a mammoth human being, over 400 pounds. So yes, it's possible. Alec, the last thing I'll hit you with is, by my evaluation, Illinois and Brett Bielema's first year was highly successful. For that team to go 4-5 in a strong conference, 5-7 overall, to beat Penn State. They had a bad year. They had an off year, but still they have a top 10 talented roster in the nation. They beat Penn State. They beat a Minnesota team that went 9-4. They blow out their rival at the end of the year. They beat Nebraska, who's considered by most to be on paper a much better team than Illinois. I just thought it was a remarkable season, even though, yes, the passing offense made it look extremely ugly and brutal at times. It was tough to watch Illinois try to eke out a first down at times, but the bottom line was 4 impressive wins there. And however, coming out of that success on the field, you talked about the recruiting, and yeah, it's a developmental program, and that's what the Big Ten West is, top to bottom, basically. And the success that Minnesota and Iowa and others now have achieved is you take top 35 to 40 recruiting classes and you build them into top 15 teams. But this recruiting class, the numbers are large with 26, and I'm talking about the 22 class, didn't sign a player. And this hit me across the face when I was watching the Big Ten Network's coverage of National Signing Day, and they were, reviewing and you see all the classes lined up against each other, and you see where this is by far, from a metric standpoint, the worst class in the Big Ten.
It's not a great class, but I think it's a decent foundational class with certain guys that they were able to land. Just to name a few, Aiden Lawfrey, that was a big win for Illinois. They won him over Iowa. That's something that Illinois needs to kind of do on a more consistent basis with players. Jared Beatty is someone that they're really high on, an outside linebacker. They believe he can potentially be an NFL player. They're also really high on another outside linebacker they signed in this class, Gabe Hawkeyes, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. Both of those two outside linebackers were pursued pretty heavily by Tennessee, approaching the early signing period in December. So those are both three pretty big wins. But then there's also some developmental prospects that didn't have a whole lot of Power 5 offers, especially on the offensive line, with guys like Joey Okla, Magnus Moller is a really interesting prospect. He's also 6'8", 6'9". He's from Denmark. He's an offensive tackle. He was kind of found somehow. They weren't planning to take another offensive lineman, and Bart Miller, Illinois' offensive line coach, saw enough of him to kind of want to mold him and bring him in. But then there's also some other interesting prospects on the offensive line. Hunter Whitenack, someone that Coach Bielema is really going to like. Same with Joey Oklo. Those are two like really good prospects in terms of building a culture. And I think that's a lot of times what you want to do in your first class, your first full class. But they did get two intriguing offensive linemen on the transfer front or JUCO front. And Isaiah Adams, he's from Garden City Community College out in Kansas. Viewers might know, or you guys might know him from, not know him, but know that school from Last Chance U, season 3 and 4. And then they got another one who's really interesting in Zy Chrysler. Chrysler might have a higher ceiling. He just might need to lose a little bit of weight. He's really physical. He's really aggressive offensive lineman, can play guard or tackle. Same with Adams. But yeah, it's definitely not like the most eye-opening class where you're going to look at it and be like, wow, that is a great class. That is an awesome first class for Illinois. But there's pieces in this class that you feel like you can build off of. Sean Miller's another one at wide receiver who probably is going to contribute a lot this year as a freshman. A lot of that might have to do with the fact that Illinois' wide receiver room is still one of the worst in the Power 5 in the entire country. But there's other developmental guys that they think could be talented at wide receiver. Ian Pugh just needs to put on a little bit of weight, but could be a good player for them down the years at wide receiver. And another in-state kid. Jordan Anderson is one of the most, I mean, you think like Brett Bielema running back, there you go. I mean, the kid's like 6'3", 6'4", weighs a good 220 pounds. If you want to watch him run over people on his huddle film, you won't get tired of it because it just keeps happening over and over.
John Clay-esque.
Yes, very John Clay-esque. But he's got some speed to him as well. I'm big on Jordan Anderson. I think he's got the potential to be a really good player. And Lawfrey's kind of like that speedy, lightning quick guy that they're really high on. It's just a really interesting class. The quarterback in the class is Donovan Leary. He comes from New Jersey. And the interesting aspect with that is, yeah, he's a Bielema quarterback recruit and signee, but he's not a Barry Lunny signee at quarterback. So is that Lenny's guy? We don't really know yet. I think Illinois is probably going to end up in the portal again in a year from now for another quarterback. And I guess maybe I'll leave it with you guys on this. If Illinois football is going to take the next step from a team that hovers around 6-6, under 6-6, struggling to get to bowl games, and quite frankly, getting to bowl games shouldn't be as hard as Illinois has made it look in the 21st century and over the last decade, to be more specific, they need to find a stable quarterback. They've basically gone the transfer market for a quarterback since Nate Schulhouse left the program in 2013. We're pushing a decade on transfer quarterbacks. And
they've also just dealt with health problems, right? Brandon Peters couldn't stay healthy. Sikowski's, I mean, they just can't stay healthy at the position.
Yeah, Wes Lunt, another guy who couldn't stay healthy. They had a quarterback retire and Chase Crouch because of injuries. And now Crouch wasn't very good, but still, like, to have that happen, it's tough to be successful in a college program. We don't have stable quarterback play. And a lot of that comes from a lot of the head coaching turnover that Illinois had in the last decade and offensive coordinator turnover they've had too. But if they can find a quarterback, and this goes for every program, right? Like, their floor just elevates a lot. And while DeVito could get them to a bowl game this year, he's only got one more year of eligibility. So the ceiling of Illinois football is not high right now, but it seems to be going up based off of what Bielema's done. But if he's able to get the right quarterback in situation, the offense takes some steps this year, I think a bowl game's possible. But I don't think it's something I would guarantee. I think I would closer to 5-7, 4-8 again this year.
Alec Bussey, Illinois Rivals there, Orange and Blue News platform. Alec, we appreciate you stopping by, and thank you for the breakdown on the Illini.
Thank you
so
very
much. Travels in the future.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Have a good one. Good luck with the rest of the show.
Appreciate it, sir. That was fun. I enjoyed that, Mark. I'm glad that the individual who nearly died on the plane is okay. That's good to know. It's crazy what happens in this world that you never hear about, right? So I know we got about 20 minutes. Do we want to dive into, first of all, can I go through
Absolutely.
and
thank I wanted to get to these super chats. So we've got 3 of them. Erica, thank you so much for your contribution. Tim as well, USC fan contributing to the Iowa channel. Thank you, Tim, for that. We appreciate that. And again, Erica, you're great. You're always here. Thank you so much for that. Lemansky, we appreciate it. Corey, you are on a content roll. We may want to look up the spelling of role, but that's okay. You have a role, Corey, as a
Lansky
content
got the wrong
creator,
role.
and you are also on a roll. So we'll take
That's
it both
right.
ways. Mark's going to pat you on the back. Am I really? Lemansky's urging me to pat you on the back here. Illinois is capable of giving Hawks a game if Brett can improve his line play. Well, Lemansky, you are patting Corey on the back, and he well deserves it. So I will allow you to do that.
Well, I appreciate that. And listen, Illinois, they've, like I said, they have. I know Alec didn't really act like they did. That 2020 game was very close until the second half. And
I looked it up. Sure, it's 14-13 at halftime.
Yeah, and last year, again, Iowa needed to come back. It did not feel like I was going to win that game last year. So
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is you can't overlook any of these games. And
Nope.
with the coaching boost that they've gotten, and I do think it's a coaching boost going from, and I respect Lovie Smith. I think he's a great person from everything I know. I know Don Patterson knows Lovie and has spoken very highly of him. But I think Brett's a better coach. I think he's better for that situation. I think he's being more of a natural recruiter than Lovie. I think he's got the ability to make that a very respectable program, which should scare Iowa fans because somebody's got to be bad, right? Somebody has to be bad. And I don't know that Pat Fitzgerald's just going to be willing to, accept, I guess we're 3-9 every year. I don't think that's going to happen. And unless we think Nebraska's just going to continue wallowing in slop for years, something's going to change. And I hope it's not Iowa that has to take its time there at the bottom. But there's just a great division. Everybody wants to think that the Big Ten West is kind of the crappy division. It's just not what the Big Ten East is. But it's, as we've talked about, Mark, it's maybe the most balanced division in college football.
I love it. And it's not balanced mediocre. It's balanced with a lot of top 15 to 40 teams. And that I think is, I'm intrigued by the Big Ten Western Division.
And the teams that scare me, Mark, not the other teams, obviously they could lose to Wisconsin, they could lose to Minnesota, but the teams that are kind of sneaky scary are the teams that aren't even in the mix there. Illinois, Nebraska, and Northwestern. Like those teams all could beat you. I could see Nebraska finishing top 2 or top 3 in the division. Not saying they will, but I could see it happening. Iowa's nearly lost to Illinois. Seems like every other year they lose to Northwestern. Even that game last year against Northwestern, that was not it was not like a dominant performance from Iowa, and Northwestern was terrible. So, I guess my point is
Northwestern had the ball to win the game.
Yes.
Near the red zone at the end of the game.
I know. And so I looked back at Iowa's schedule the other day, Mark, and I didn't realize how many close games they were in. It's like every week they were playing. Listen, you're 10-2, and everybody wants to celebrate, and I was celebrating. Don't get me wrong, but they were like the opposite of Nebraska. Like they were playing close games and winning them. Nebraska was playing close games and losing. There's a very fine line, right? In college football.
Yeah.
And I'm not, there is something to be said for being able to win close games. I'm not taking that away from Kirk and this
skill.
Team.
Sure.
It's a skill, definitely. And not everybody has it. Certainly Scott Frost doesn't. But the schedule gets tougher. We keep saying this, and Illinois is not going to be a pushover in Champaign.
And there is some randomness to it. It's like turnovers. Iowa has proven through the years that they're not a mistake in terms of their excellence in creating turnovers, but there is a element of randomness to a certain extent in turnovers and in close wins in Nebraska. It's going to be fascinating to see. Nebraska is the most fascinating team to me in the division just because of how they played last year, but continued to find a way to lose. And their Ohio State, Michigan State becomes Michigan, Indiana, Rutgers.
But doesn't it freak you out a little bit, Mark, that we already know Minnesota, Purdue, Iowa, and Wisconsin are in position to compete for the division? But then doesn't it also kind of freak you out that the two teams that no one's talking about is Illinois, who's got Brett Bielema as their head coach, and again, I know that he hasn't had a lot of time to recruit yet, and then maybe the best coach in the Big Ten, and Pat Fitzgerald, like that always he's the guy that goes from 3-9 to 9-3 routinely. So that is a little bit freaky. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I think there's a better chance that Northwestern, can we both agree there's a much better chance still, despite his track record, that Northwestern goes 3-9 this year than 9-3, given their talent level.
Yeah, that's a high leap, even though they've done it a couple times, as you mentioned, against how good the rest of the divisions become.
Yeah, and I just don't know who, from a skill, at some point, right, as our friend Steve Dace says, sometimes the Jimmies and Joes beat the X's and O's, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know that they have the Jimmies and Joes. But anyways, no, thank you to all the super chats. Appreciate that. And thank you to Alec. Glad we were able to make that happen. Hopefully we'll have him back game week in October.
Steve and I just had a Rock'em Sock'em segment there on Michigan Podcast. So folks, check that out, because I came emblazoned in scarlet and gray this week. I typically don't do that, but I typically am very measured and neutral. But yeah. Big Ten quarterback rankings. I'm working feverishly on those.
Crap.
Spencer Petras. Okay, yeah. Tommy DeVito, speaking of Illinois, had a really nice season with Syracuse. His one starting year, 19 touchdowns, 5 picks.
Yes, nobody's talking about him. I'm telling you, the Big Ten was not very good. I remember me saying this all last year, Mark. Last year was the year of the wide receiver in the Big Ten Conference, right? Yeah. With David Bell and Freifogel and, I mean, just everybody that Ohio State throws out there. And then you look at quarterback, and it was kind of a down year. I think maybe that changes this year. I think Connor Bazelak, I'm not saying he's going to be a superstar at Indiana, but I think he's going to give them a boost. Tanner Morgan, it's now or never for him. Certainly CJ Stroud, and we'll see. The Michigan quarterback battle is interesting, but DeVito's a guy nobody's talking about. And yeah, I mean, it does. So Alec kind of has the opposite perspective of someone like me, or an Iowa fan, who has been calling for Kirk and Iowa to go to the portal at quarterback, and he's like, we got to do something other than go to the portal at quarterback. So it's interesting, and I did have that discussion last night. If anybody missed the show with Tony Rassiopi, head over to From the Hawkeye of the Storm. It's also on our podcast, so check out that Hawkeye Hangout edition. But he talked about Art Sikowski with me after the show, and I do find that interesting. Art Sikowski has dealt with so much from an injury perspective that, Tony, again, Art's Tony's guy, just like Spencer is Tony's guy. But it'll be interesting to see if, regardless of who starts, I would expect, assuming both DeVito and Sikowski are healthy, it's not going to be like the Peters Sitkowski battle, because those guys couldn't stay healthy. So both these guys can stay healthy. They're going to push each other. And both their clocks are ticking now. I mean, DeVito's got 1 year. I think maybe Sitkowski's got a couple of years left at least. But it will be intriguing to see what happens there at quarterback. I feel like we should probably bring up the Kaden Proctor news that we got over the past week, Mark, because that's kind of what Iowa fans have on their minds right now. He did cancel some official visits he had scheduled, including a visit to Penn State in September, basically stating that he wanted to focus on his senior year of high school football, which tells me he did schedule an Iowa visit. So he didn't have an official Iowa visit prior to this, although he had taken like a dozen unofficials in the past. But he did schedule an official Iowa visit to replace the visits he canceled. That is happening this weekend. I see this a couple different ways, and I haven't produced anything on my channel as far as content reacting to this news yet. But I do wonder, does this mean that he went to Alabama and they sold it to him, and he's just keeping eye? Guys will do that. And I saw somebody respond on Twitter like, oh, that'd be a low move on his part to throw Iowa in the mix at the end. I don't look at it that way. A lot of homegrown kids that leave, whether we're talking basketball or football, will keep that hometown school in their top 5, in their top 3, and even in their top 2 as almost not toying with emotion, with the fans, emotions, but as kind of a line of respect, a symbol of respect or gratitude, I guess. That's kind of how I look at it. And I am not saying that Kaden Proctor is going to Alabama. I don't know that. But I'm just saying, if he does, I hope people don't say, well, why did we even make his top 2? I think that's probably realistic, that he probably is down to Alabama and Iowa. I don't know who else would there have been no reason for him to do that. He could have kept Michigan in the top 3 had he decided to do that. Now, he canceled the visit to Michigan, so I'm guessing that he didn't have them even close there. But so it could be that he was sold when he went down there, and he's going to be part of the Crimson Tide, or he might be sold on Iowa, and he may have went down to Alabama and said, "This doesn't feel like home. I know where home is. I love my teammate Xavier Wampa. I want to play with him. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to eliminate everyone else. I'm going to just cancel all the other visits. I'm going to go to Iowa one more time and tell Kirk Ferentz in person that, hey, I'm all in." That's possible. So I just don't know, and I don't have any inside information. But I do think, I tweeted this out after the news broke, I do think he probably knows where he's going. I don't think he needs a 12th or a 13th visit or whatever it is to Iowa City to make that call. I think he knows. So I think we're going to get an announcement soon. I don't know that he'll commit on the spot, but I would not be shocked if he's going to Iowa that we hear this weekend. But it may come later. I don't think he's going to wait a lot longer, though. It sounded from his message on Twitter that he wants to get this out of the way prior to the season. So that's sooner than I had originally anticipated. And just to put this in perspective, for anybody wondering why are we talking about a kid's top 2? This is the number 1 offensive tackle in the country. It would be, and I don't think it'd be really even that close. I'd have to look back at Rivals rankings and 247's all-time rankings. Kaden Proctor would be, I think, by far the highest rated recruit Iowa's ever gotten in the history of Iowa football. So at least in the history of rankings. And I don't think it's that close, quite frankly. And so I guess it's fitting that it's Iowa and Alabama, right? In the final 2, right? The best program in the country. So it would be huge if Iowa gets him. I texted Marco Lainez after he made the top 2, and I said, boy, wouldn't this be something? He could kind of end up being the Tristan Wirfs, Tom Brady type relationship if Lainez and Proctor end up coming to Iowa in 23. That'd be, I think if you're Lainez, you're especially hopeful that Proctor is coming here. But for the most part, I think Hawkeye Nation is pretty positive about it right now. But I just hope that Iowa fans realize if he goes somewhere else, if he ends up going to Alabama, that is the nature of the game. And I don't think he's done any disservice to Iowa in keeping Iowa along. He's not stringing them along. I think it's a sign of gratitude, and it's still good for Iowa. Like if you're not going to get the kid, it's good that he is known, nationally that, hey, Iowa was in his final 2. So that's positive, but I think we'll know something. I would guess I think maybe in the coming week, a week or 2, I'd be surprised if this goes on to July.
Because to your final point, there are all sorts of high 5-star kind of guys that if there is not an elite program in their backyard, they completely just bypass it, and they're suddenly just thrown into the national mix, and their final 4 or 5 completely discards whatever team is in their backyard. So you want the player on the field, but in regards to trying to spin this positively into other recruiting successes, that can be spun into a positive. It is interesting also because with most of these high-level prospects, there is some connectivity between a final 2, 3, 4. Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, and a player's final 3, or Ohio State, Notre Dame, Michigan, or whatever the case might be. There's a disconnect here, just Alabama, Iowa. He's definitely, and another reason why I believe you're correct in saying that he knows where he's going, most likely, we're conjecturing, is that these programs are so different in different areas of the country and everything.
Yeah.
There's just a distinct decision he's making here.
He's already been to Alabama. He's been to Iowa like literally 11 or 12 times. So that honestly, Mark, that's why I would lean Iowa, because of the fact that he canceled the visits and now has scheduled an Iowa visit. I don't know really why do that. That would, in a way, kind of be like you're stringing Iowa along. Like, is he coming at this point just to tell Kirk, hey, I'm really sorry, I appreciate everything, but I'm going to go to play for Saban? So I would lean towards Proctor's made his decision and it's Iowa, or he's leaning Iowa and he wants one more visit just to solidify that choice. So I don't know. But again, the reason I pause and I'm not all in on that, and then I'm not committing, I guarantee he's coming to Iowa, is because of the fact that he just got done with Alabama. And that's when he chose to eliminate the other schools. So I can see it either way, but I'm feeling a lot better now than I was a couple weeks ago. And there were rumors swirling on social media from Cyclone fans that created fake accounts to try to troll Iowa fans. And I took the bait, of course, on that. But I feel a lot better now than I did at that point.
Spark CW. I apologize because I don't recognize your handle, or maybe you switched up your avatar, your profile picture, and that's throwing me off. But obviously, you're an ardent supporter of Corey's work, which is phenomenal. But you've also commented here in the last few minutes, number one, that you would like to see a Voice of College Football Discord, and I'm glad that a number of people let you know that we do have a Discord. So you go to Patreon, you search Mark Rogers TV, and you sign up there, and I get you a link. And basically what you've got right here in the live chat, you've got 24/7, 365 at the Voice of College Football on Patreon in Discord. And then also, look at this. Corey's always pushing me to expand the platform.
Yeah.
And this is right in line with it right here. This would be phenomenal, but I don't know how to manage this thing. We need a 24/7 live stream news loop of Voice of College Football. I would need all sorts of bringers out there.
Yeah, I don't know that would be real practical. Is that the word, Mark? Real practical.
That's the word.
I will say this. One other thing too before we move on. I see Erica's comment. I hope X is recruiting Proctor hard. Yeah, and Wampa is. There's no question about that. I brought up Proctor's size, so we know Kaden Leonard, 6'9", 265, class of 23. Yep. Proctor, for anybody that doesn't know this, is listed at 6'8", 335 pounds. I mean, the guy's a mammoth. So, like, my guess is, obviously, it's very rare that you're going to see a freshman tackle start and play. But I think if he comes here, he's probably a starter year one, right, Mark? Do you keep him off the field at 6'8", 335?
I think he plays.
I think he plays right away. So it's going. Yeah, not only is it big for Iowa, it's big from a perspective is you're going to probably get him longer. Tristan Wirfs played early, but you may get Proctor in the field day one. So if he's here 2 years, you may get 2 full years from Proctor. So I think the fact that he's that even higher, more highly recruited and a better prospect than Wirfs was out of high school would lend me to think that, yeah, he's probably going to get 2 full years at Iowa before he jumps to the pros, assuming he stays healthy.
I wonder how much impact this signing would have. I tend to think, and I could be way off on this, this is not something that I've got a strong feel for, that it's kind of isolated. Meaning when you get one of the best players in the country, sometimes they bring a lot of people with them.
Well, remember this. Marco Linez was a 4-star recruit, and for some reason his stock has went down on some websites. I don't quite get that. But that's a foundation, Mark, on offense with Linez and Proctor. That's a really strong foundation. They have struggled. I've said this before in the last couple of weeks. They've struggled at tight end. They lost on Mac Markway. They lost a kid last week to Miami. Running back, they get Raphael. Now you have, that was just last week. Now you have potentially Raphael, Proctor, and Linez. Those are 3 pretty darn good offensive recruits. And yeah, Iowa's had guys. Keegan Johnson was a pretty highly touted kid. Elijah Yelverton, who never really played a snap at Iowa on offense. He was a pretty highly touted tight end. Josiah Meeman, same thing. So they've had some guys that haven't worked out. But I do think it would make me more positive about their chances of being able to land more skill position guys. Because even though the offense hasn't been good, and Iowa does develop well along the offensive line, I think you're certainly it's not going to hurt things from a recruiting standpoint on offense. And I don't know I don't know enough about Kaden Leonard. They just offered him like 1 day ago before he committed. So I'll have to do some digging before producing some content on him. But that is an interesting. Can we go back to that just before we conclude this show, Mark?
Sure.
What happens if he grows 2 inches? And I mean that seriously. It's not a joke. What happens if he grows another inch or 2? What do you do with him?
Meaning that's a difficult body type to.
I mean, when have you ever heard of a 6'11" tackle at the Power 5 Division I level? I don't.
At some point, anatomy, yes, does go into this. That we hear this around NFL draft time, that playing offensive tackle is a number of positions. There's a lot to body contortion. There's a lot to bend and all of that. I would tend to switch him over to D end, and he can bat down a million passes. I don't know.
And he did play. He's playing defense in high school, so that maybe that's what Iowa is thinking. But even 6'10", 6'11" on defense is ridiculous. Iowa had Anthony Nelson, who was pushing 6'8". Matt Nelson was 6'7", 6'8" too. But that would be interesting. But yeah, you're right. That might be his future if he grows any more than he is now. That might be his future anyways. I don't know. Like I said, 6, 7, or 9 just seems huge. But
yeah,
it'll be interesting. Run blocking is my concern there, because if you get too tall,
yes,
exactly. I don't know how you get down and get leverage. So
yeah. Well, folks, it's been a great show here at the Voice of College Football on our Iowa segment each and every week with all of you. And is always the case, we hit the most people right now at the conclusion of the show. So this means two things.
I know what it means.
We've been around 40 the entire show, and then we hit 50. Is that, number one, that you need to stick around for just a couple minutes, wait for the video to post. So once we conclude, you can go back and you can watch the entirety. And we had a great conversation with Alec Bussey from Rivals platform for Illinois athletics to talk Illini football, and of course a number of Iowa topics as well. And also, number two, that you need to remind yourself next week in any such way that the show starts at 4:30 Central. So be here on time. You can join in the live chat, leave your comments and questions as we try to build this. And so, folks, bring college football fans into this is probably a little bit different of a crowd, I'm guessing, than what you have, Corey, from the Hawkeye of the Storm in regards to the mixture of other fan bases coming in.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Erica, I know, I'm just thinking last night, I know Erica was on the show last night with Tony Rassiopi. Hawkeye Howard says he just woke up. So he's explaining himself to you, Mark. Hawkeye Howard just woke up. He's a truck driver. He just woke up. Okay. Give him a break. But yeah, no, I appreciate everybody being here. And honestly, Spark CW, I don't know if is that a change? I don't recognize the name. So Spark CW, I appreciate you being here. I hope you're subscribed to my channel, but I don't recognize your name. And maybe it's because you changed your profile logo. The Real Hayden's here. He's obviously a loyalist. Mike 3883. I know he's on a lot of your stuff, and he heads over to my channel as well. So thank you to everybody for being here. And I don't know if we missed this super chat from Erica, but she reminds everybody to please gently tap that like button. Go Hawks. So appreciate that from Erica. Yeah, the Tony Rassiopi, make one last comment, Mark. The Tony Rassiopi interview was insightful. If you're looking to kind of find positives in Iowa's quarterback situation, because a lot of fans are down on the quarterback situation. I've been down on Iowa's quarterback play, and I think most people have. Check out the interview with Tony Rassiopi. Perhaps he can inspire some fans. Said some really nice things about Spencer Petras as a person, and he believes that Spencer Petras is going to take the step forward. I don't know if he believes it'll be the Kenny Pickett-like leap, but he thinks it's going to be a jump. So is Tony Rassiopi a businessman? Of course he is. I'm not saying that I buy into it hook, line, and sinker, but I do think that he's absolutely genuine, and I believe that he believes that Spencer will take that step. And I think there's reason to think Tony Rassiopi is very qualified to be the guy teaching Spencer. He's teaching guys like Kenny Pickett and Art Sitkowski and guy from Michigan State last year. I can't think of his name, but I mean, he's very involved. Yeah. He's very involved everywhere. And so maybe that'll inspire some confidence, but head over to the channel from the Hawkeye of the Storm and check out that segment with Tony.
Yes. Well, Kenny Pickett, the offense and the personnel and the approach more than anything on offense is not going to allow Spencer Petras to take that kind of leap to 42 touchdown passes and 4,000 plus yards. But what is a reasonable expectation of a Spencer Petras, and not just pulling this out of him, but considering everything else that I just mentioned, personnel and approach? 25 touchdowns, 10 picks.
Yeah, I mean that'd be really good. I mean, but if we're talking about really good in Iowa, that's really good in Iowa's system. Yeah,
Sure.
25 touchdowns, 10
That
picks.
would be
That's
phenomenal.
if he can throw, if he can hit that 60% mark. I think 62, 63 would be ideal. If he's throwing midway through the season, if he's doubled well, I don't know that I'd say that because midway through the season, you're talking about also taking into account an FCS game, a game against Nevada, a game against Rutgers. But if he's throwing for, I don't know, midway through the season, I guess if he was at 12 touchdowns, 3 or 4 picks, and he's 65%, I think that's pretty much going to put to bed. It should probably put to bed the quarterback debate. But if he's hovering just under 60% and he's 8 touchdowns, 6 picks, no, the debate needs to continue. That's football. I mean, I really appreciate guys like Tony Racioppi, but that's just how I feel. They've got 4 guys. Carson May will be here competing this fall as well, and it still needs to be an open competition. Spencer has not won the job. I do expect him to be the starter, but he has not. I don't believe, unless they know something I don't. He has not won the job, nor do I think he should have won the job. This needs to continue into fall, and we need to let fall camp. And Carson May needs to have an opportunity. Everybody wants to talk about Labus. I know that it's going to be very, very hard for May to even, learn the system that quickly. But he's a 4-star recruit. Give him a shot, because I always struggled with that position, and why not?
I agree. Everyone, head on over to From the Hawkeye of the Storm if you have yet to do so. Of course, Corey's got great content over there, tremendous interviews that he pulls in as the recruiting unfolds throughout the 2023 class. We're about 6 months away from National Signing Day. And of course, we are just about a month away from Big Ten Media Days, and we'll roll right into August camp, and we'll be off and running on both of our platforms here at the Voice of College Football. And again, From the Hawkeye of the Storm. You can join us in about 20, 25 minutes on our Nebraska show over on the Nebraska channel as well. Right, Corey?
Appreciate it, Mark.
We'll talk.
Yeah, we'll talk next week, maybe talking about a Proctor commitment.
That would be phenomenal.